Elite Dangerous is a first-person spaceship flighting simulator. There's no actual plot to the game other than the factions that you're presented with, and you're just a random guy with no goal nor limits to your quest. Now, if this was a proper review, the main thing I'd point out is why the game actually has no goal. That's both to its benefit and to its downside. Having no goal can be a deal breaker for some people, so if you're someone who enjoys having sympathetical characters and a quest to fulfill, that's not a game for you. Now, so this is a mechanical breakdown. Let's just break down the mechanics and see what it's consistent of. That would be rather simple to do, as the game consists of several basic mechanics, that being flying around, ship combat, docking, trading, interacting with NPC players, mining, and as well customizing your ship. Flying around is basically what you'll most likely spend most of your time on Elite Dangerous. Being a simulator, the game has a lot of off time during trips. This makes the game both time demanding and cohesive at the same time. There is no loading screen within your journey, which makes for an amazing transactions from one place to another without noticing the world around you change. So how does flying around works? Well, the basics are the following. Well, you have of course your throttle, which determines the speed of the craft you're on. You also have the ability to yaw all directions, which can be really useful when docking, and other than that you can boost by using your energy and your capacitors. The speed of your ship can be determined by the chassis itself, the engines you own, and the power capacitors. When you're flying outside of frameshift drive, the vessel will handle realistically, and provided with amazing sound design, you truly feel as if you were on a ship. Maneuvering the ship can be done by the controller you might own. It may be keyboard or mouse, Xbox or PlayStation controller, but I would personally suggest a flight stick. The immersion and controller you have are far superior and make the overall experience all the better. Moving on, we have ship combat. Ship combat is both simple and complicated at the same time. You have the ability to assign both primary and secondary fire to different weapons. Those will of course fire in your command. In order for you to fire, you have to deploy your hardpoints. That gives a warning to your opponents, meaning that they can ready for the battle too. Now, discussing the weapons themselves, there are different categories. Those can differentiate in many factors such as armor penetration, thermal load, ammunition requirements, and so on. The ways to fire those weapons are basically three. There are homing weapons. They lock on your targeted opponent, and when you fire them, they follow you till they either hit or some way are driven off. There are beams that directly influence the place you're firing at, and there is normal weapons that you have to target forward depending on your opponent's mood in order to hit. All those have their own merits and disadvantages, but this is what they boil down to. Lasers and thermal weapons are good against shields. Those are best used when your opponent has your shields up, and you will want a quick way to get them down, but with a big energy cost, as they drain directly from your capacitors, they're not really the best choice you should always go for. Also, lasers are pretty accurate, meaning that if you want to shoot down a specific part of your opponent's ship, you can target it by the heads-up display and deal damage to it directly by targeting it. Machine guns are generally good against hulls. That means that once your opponent's shields are down, and since they cannot be very accurate, you usually have to drop your opponent's HP down by quite a lot. Missiles are generally the most expensive and ones to get ammunition for, and are the heavy hitters of your ship. You generally want to think twice before firing your missiles, as you have a serious chance of either being outrun by your opponent using a decoy not to get hit, or simply running faster than them. They can also be targeted to specific parts of the enemy ship, such as the cargo hold or the life support unit, to deal damage beyond simply bashing your opponent. While not very accurate at that, they're quite solid as a means of damaging. Fights in space are quite enjoyable and quite deep. They differ every time, as enemy ships can be vastly and differentially customized, and while you could be fighting the same chassis, you should be needing different tactics in order to beat them. That being said, most of the enemy ships you'll be fighting in Elite Dangerous are AI ships. While the map is gigantic, actually meeting enemy players to want to battle with you is rather rare. And while the AI is somewhat competent, I'm pretty sure that they could improve some of the endgame ships, or at least way better the maneuver to feel a bit more natural and less be like killing a helpless machine that may or even may not get shot on your shields. Now, in combat, there comes a really important system that are the energy capacitors. Like mentioned above, some of your weapons may need a direct feed from your ship's energy. The 3 bars on the bottom represent how much energy you have dedicated to each one of the systems. System, which is basically the energy dedicated to your shields and life support. Engines, that increases and decreases your overall speed, and your weapons. While fighting, you will have to manage those, otherwise you will find yourself be unable to fire a consistent amount of damage in between encounters and maneuvers. That being said, it's enjoyable and really adds to how the mechanical voice in the back of your head keeps track of almost all things in progress, as well as how your shields are doing, if some specific part of your craft is damaged, so on and so forth. Docking isn't really need of a different category, but it was kind of bugged to get right, so I'll throw a couple of tips. When you approach big stations, lock them in. The little hologram on the bottom, arrows will appear that will represent where the entry for those stations are. I can't just mention how many times I got lost going around and around circular stations trying to find entry points. Other than that, most stations have a 7.5 kilometer lock, meaning you have to get closer in order to request permission to dock. Once you've done that, you can enter by the green side of the door and land. You have a specific time in which you have to do that, and if you're caught going beyond that, you will be charged with loitering and you'll probably be shot down by the station itself. Interacting with NPCs is important. That is because throughout the game you will meet 3 main factions as mentioned before. Those have a rating for you, and it is rather important. If you go up to that rating, that means that those factions trust you more. This way you will be able to gain access to more bulletin board missions and also advance to the rank and become legends, hence the name. Other than that, getting quests from the stations is one way to gain money, as is going bounty hunting for a specific region or a solar system and so on. What that means is that you can go redeem the bounties that you've gained from killing wanted people to specific people who put them on. And that may be a buckle in your buttocks, as sometimes you may leave the solar system that you have to redeem the bounty on and then realize it was a solar system you were before, and then you have to go back to redeem it. You may also find people in unidentified signal sources that may want to change the way your quest plays out for whatever reason they have. It may also be stranded cargo, but it is considered illegal if you pick it up, and you will be fined if you're found or scanned within it, and you can sell it to the black market for a higher price, but that is really dependent on the cargo itself. However, the price remains the same for the fine you will get. Trading, on the other hand, is rather simple. Buy something for a station that has a particular item on low demand for a low price, and then move from one galaxy to another with that item in your storage, looking for a system that will pay a high price for the item. Well, maybe not the most exciting, it's a really good way of making money, and it's a nice way to get deeper into the planetary system of the game. Different solar systems have different needs depending on what kinds of planet they have. That means that you can look to your galaxy map, and it's really big before going somewhere with no knowledge whatsoever. Mining is a process I didn't quite put myself through. I mean, I did some research just to inform you what that is. I'm not quite sure if you guys are interested in it. However, I will tell you some of the basics. So to mine, you have to add something that is called a mining laser. Well, duh. And also a refinery. Well, duh again. Those will come together to create materials depending on what common you happen to be mining at the time. Afterwards, the materials you get will have different impact on the market depending on how much of them you sell and the place you sell them on. Now, last but not least, is the vehicle customization. That's a bit odd, as it may appear complicated and way too in-depth when the first time you see it, but as you go forward, you will be easily able to understand all you need to know about it, about the kind of way you want to play the game. Depending on your chassis, you will get some options that you can get to upgrade or downgrade your ship, depending on your money. The thing I find amazing about Elite Dangerous is that there is no subjective better option. I specifically recall when I bought a new power capacitor, and then I installed a new laser because my old one wouldn't allow me to. The thing is that the new one, while increased the overall watts that I could use on my ship, it decreased the watts when deployed, the hard points, making me overload my system after I frame shifted drive and get into airlock mode while on deep space, meaning that I had to return to the station with a supply of oxygen while my hard points were deployed. Thankfully, you don't have to deploy the hard points to frameshift drive back to the station, but I went back and bought a new one, and for half the price as the old one, and realized that it actually for the ships are well designed. Let's also mention that you can buy paints for your ship via microtransactions, but yeah, that's cosmetic and stuff. But they look really cool, I have to admit. I caught myself up in the sense that I could buy some, but they're not that cheap. So, Yeah. Okay, to wrap up. Elite Dangerous, while a mechanically competent game, is not the most mechanically complex game that can be out there, out of the flight simulator genre. Does it have a lot of buttons? Yeah, it does. It's a simulator, for God's sake. But other than that, it's not really the kind of game that's really hard to get into, and it's quite relaxing once you do. I mean, most of the time I spent after the first 2 hours that I enjoyed the music's game, the game that the music, that fuck's sake, I cannot even talk properly. The music that the game had to offer, I quite stopped listening to it and I started listening to some podcasts that I might wanted to at some point of the week and didn't have the time, or just downright listen to other music. It's quite relaxing, and when you do fight, it's tense and you want to focus, but generally speaking, it's a game that if you have anger issues, you could play, but just don't fight a lot, because if you die, you will get punished for it. And lastly, I should mention the punishment of death, which is you lose your ship. There is a rebuy cost depending on the insurance you have bought for your ship. That could be 95% or even less, depending on how much you've bought for your ship. That means that, say, I buy a ship for 100,000 CP. Then that ship, if I die, it would normally cost me 50,000, right? And 5,000 CP. And if I upgrade it with something that costs, say, 70,000, that would go on, and it would add up to the overall cost of the rebuy. That should about wrap up my mechanical breakdown about Elite Dangerous. It was a long video, yes it was, about 13 minutes long. And I was only talking about the mechanics of the game, so I hope you're glad you spent your life on that, and hopefully next time on the mechanical breakdown we will have something that may interest you more or may interest you less. If you are considering whether to buy or not Elite Dangerous, I would say hold off, make sure you actually enjoy the kind of game, and go on and buy it if you're any way into it, because it's just great. Thank you guys for watching. This has been Lol Forever, and I am out.